Hi. Before I start, I would like to ask you for something very simple. Just for a moment, look around the room. Not quickly, but actually look. Take in the people, take in the space, and the small details. Now, how confident are you that you noticed everything? Most people would say fairly confident. And you wouldn't be the only one to believe so. According to Dr. Trisha Urish, 95% of people believe so, but the reality is only 10% of people are actually aware. And this is what we call selective attention, something that our brain actually notices when we look for it. And what we don't look at and what we don't focus on, we don't notice. Now, today I would like to talk to you about attention, or rather the lack thereof. This talk isn't random. In fact, it's structured around a pattern, carefully, repeatedly. You might notice it, but realistically, you won't, because even when things are consistent, we don't notice. Our brain is constantly filtering through information. We are exposed to a lot of information a day, which consists of sound, movement, and conversation, but we only process a very certain part of it. Our total sensory input is over 11 billion bits per second, while our total capacity of conscious processing is only 50 to 40 bits per second. And I'm pretty sure you see the discrepancy in this. As mentioned in the beginning, this is also called selective attention. What we don't focus on, we don't notice. Now, let's talk about media. It is such a big part of our life. We look at media every day. Alone in the UK, 52% of adults use social media as their primary news source. And that number is even higher in 16 to 24-year-olds. 75%. 75% of young adults use social media as their primary news source. So what we conclude from that is most of us use short headlines, short clips, and little reels on TikTok or Instagram to get our news. And that's not accidental. It is designed that way. And the way you interpret that statement is up to you. But media competes for attention, not just quickly, but constantly, which is why information gets compressed. A long discussion becomes a 30-second clip. A long story that has very complex backgrounds becomes a short headline. And most of the time, information just gets simplified. And over time, we don't notice. Now, let's talk about another concept, which is called the availability heuristic. This concept describes the idea of judging the truth based on how important or how easy it is for us to recall. It also goes hand in hand with the concept of cognitive fluency, which basically means we like things that are easy for us to process. We like things that are easy for us to understand. Now, when everything is easy to process and everything is simplified, we start to not notice things. We start to overlook things and we start to ignore it because it doesn't seem important to us. And we get stuck in a cycle of only knowing a few pieces of information and ignoring the rest of it, which connects us to the next piece. Politics. It's one of my favorite fields, but it is also a very controversial field because we are categorized into certain things. It's very simple, left or right or wrong. And like I said, psychology tells us it's categorization. But most people don't actually fit into one category. We're spread all over a spectrum. And that spectrum can be everywhere. But most of us will still be categorized because it's just simpler to categorize people into categories and consisting of, well, beliefs, experiences, matters, even people. But when everything is categorized, because we think it's simple, we don't notice. Now, let's talk about the confirmation bias, which is a huge part of media and politics. The confirmation bias is our tendency to favor information that we already believe. So if I already believe something, I'm going to look for information that agrees with it. I might think a sweater is beautiful, and I'm going to look for the friends who would tell me, I like that sweater too. It's beautiful. You should buy it. And there's a study been done by Mendel, a clinical psychologist, who has found out that 13% of people already agree with that. And they go in, and the idea is psychologists, when they were asked to find information on a client in a study, they looked for information that already confirmed what they believed. And that number was even higher in students. As we can see, it kind of gets trained out of their mind in medical science, but it's still there, which means over time, even when we have bias, even when we say we don't want to have bias, we will, and we won't notice. Now, let's talk about first impressions, because life is not all about politics, media, or understanding of science. It's about people, and it always will be. A psychology study shows that we form our first impressions under 7 seconds. And we do. It's very easy for us, and it's a psychology that helps us a lot. Every day we form opinions about people that we meet in the first 7 seconds, and it helps us to decide what we want to do with it. But what we have to realize is it's not always going to be the truth, because your first impression is just a layer. It's not the final outcome. And when we start ignoring those layers and we start not going deeper into them and start to stick to what we already believe, we won't notice. We won't find the truth. Now, I've talked about what happens when we ignore attention. I've talked about what we do and the psychology behind it. But how do we stop it? How do we become aware? There's 2 parts to this story. So first of all, since we've seen you judge within the first 7 seconds, you need to interrupt that speed. Not drastically, not with every decision, but you need to interrupt it. It can be in quick moments. For example, before you believe what an article has said, question it, take a moment. Before you react to something online, take a pause, think about it, and maybe even do research after and then make up an opinion. And before you form an opinion on someone, take a pause. It might not be the truth. I've fallen victim to this in the past year. I have made a friend and I made an opinion very quickly about that person. But I realized the person is actually a very, very nice person, and I ignored that. But here we go. Mistakes happen, and that's why I'm talking to you about it, because you should notice. The second part about it is, The second part about it is look again. You have to think about what you've seen. You have interrupted that speed now. You have taken a break. But what happens when you don't look? You just keep going back to the same conclusion. So you need to train yourself to think about it. You need to look again. You need to assess the situation. The one question that I ask myself is, what am I missing here? I often do research and I see biases pop up in media because I read articles. And then I ask myself, what am I missing here? So I look up the other side of the argument. And oftentimes I found arguments that are actually quite viable, that make sense. And then you obviously have to either find a counter because you believe in it strongly, or you realize maybe your opinion isn't as right as you thought. But here we go. Curiosity is another part of this. It directly relates to asking the question, what am I missing here? Because you won't ask if you're not curious about something. So here, you have to stay curious. You have to ask. And you always have to follow through with that belief of questioning yourself. Because critical thinking is a skill that's going extinct within our society, and we need to keep it up. Now, this doesn't happen because we don't care. We care a lot. I care about my friends, I care about my family, I care about my work. But sometimes I don't look at the details because they don't seem relevant in that moment, because my attention is diverted. There's many instances where friends have talked to me about things, and I have been in my own pool of dissociation. I have just kept the attention to myself, not because I don't care about them, but because sometimes we're a bit selfish and we care about ourselves more than we should. Now, this happens because we don't notice. We simply don't notice. And this also has a cost. The cost is it happens quietly and we just won't notice. When you don't notice, things become quite heavy. If you don't notice that the media might be wrong, you can be misinformed. If you don't see the true layer of a person, if you don't peel the onion, you won't notice and you won't understand the person, and you might miss out on a genuine connection. And if you just don't question, you might be misinformed for life. You might stick to that. And that's the danger of it. Now, here is my decision. From now on, I will notice. I will take a step back. I will take a pause, and I will think about things. I will slow down. I will question more, and I will think critically. Because attention is a decision. And I choose to be attentive. I choose to look out for people, and I choose to understand where my decisions come from. So, it only changes when we don't notice becomes we do. Did you notice? This section was divided into 13 titles, into 13 sections, and every single time I have said we don't notice. But also there were 13 seconds given to you in the beginning. You had 13 seconds to observe around the room. And more importantly, when I asked you to observe around the room, I asked you to look out for people, for small details. And there's 13 people in this room who are wearing a green tie. Could those people please stand up? If you would like to, you can count for yourself. There are also people in the back. Thank you.